Hi everyone, this is Gary Wilson and welcome to this week's weekly live Path to Profit webinar. We are live and we are recording. Special welcome to all the new folks. Okay, welcome aboard. A couple things you'll note is you are in mute mode. You can post questions on your question box. As you post those in, I'll respond to them. Okay. For everyone, if you could please make sure you read the webinar tomorrow from Beverly. It's obviously going to contain a recording of tonight's webinar. It'll also give you the calendar, the schedule for the next coming webinars. And also she often will put in there changes to the system and changes to the content, just to notify you when we actually do change things. So there's usually some really important information in there that if you could please take a look at those when you get them, that would be wonderful. That helps to eliminate a lot of, sometimes misunderstanding or confusion on everyone's part. So I appreciate you doing that. Also, we will unmute you from time to time when the need calls for it. A few more things. Also, if you can let me know ahead of time via email what subjects you want to cover. Like, for example, I got one today from some of the folks in Colorado who want to go over the workshop again. So if we have time tonight, we'll start that process and continue it next week, if not do the whole thing next week. And we may wrap it up 2 weeks after that. So it's really important that you notify me of subjects that you'd like to cover, okay? Because this is an open forum. This is really your opportunity to share with the group, get input from the group, not just from me. And it's like it's open mic. It's a way for you to help fill in the gaps. So it's definitely, you want to participate in this, and the way you do is just to let me know what it is you'd like to discuss on these, okay? So without further ado, we're going to tonight continue with what we started last week, which had to do with the letter. And let me bring up the original letter. So this is the one letter that we really like to promote heavily because it works so well. There was another letter we went over last week that's a little more formal. The other letter has a letterhead, which you'll notice does not exist here. This letter does not have a letterhead. The other letter did have a letterhead. Also, the other letter had the last name in the salutation, okay? It works better when you just have a first name there. You get a higher response rate when you only have the first name on the letter, okay? So in any case, we went over this letter, and we also went over a third letter from Kristen Henry from the Colorado area too. So thank you, Kristen, for sharing that letter. But let me do this. Let me go back to the one screen I had up here, which is a checklist. Now, let's go over the checklist first, and then what I'm going to do is give you some additional information related to the use of the letter. So it's really important that you have pen or pencil handy and paper, if you're typing on a computer or tablet. Obviously, that's fine too. So go ahead and get ready to take some notes here. Remember, this is recorded, so you're going to get this recording the very next day. And if you haven't seen this checklist yet, I will have Beverly send this to you. I'll have her include this in the email that goes out tomorrow. In fact, what I might have her do is the written version of the letter workshop. There's a letter webinar that focuses just on the use of the letter. I will have her send you that transcription as well as the checklist. So you'll have the checklist, you'll have the transcription, which is the written form, and of course you already have available to you the audiovisual version, which is on the silver level membership section of myinvestmentservices.com website. That way you'll have everything really you need, including the letter, on how to use the letter, why we use it the way we use it, how to identify recipients of the letter. You'll really be able to make the most use of this letter. But let's listen to this. Let's look at the checklist first, and then we'll move on to the other subjects, okay? So what we generally do with some of these more popular techniques is we put together checklists to help you sort of recall or remember the key points, okay? So we'll just go through these step by step, and then we'll continue on with some additional information, excuse me. First things first is always determine and document your goals, okay? It's really important that you have a pretty good idea of what you'd like to accomplish with the use of this letter. So today, for example, I had a conversation with a student, and we were discussing inventory and how he can use this to really multiply his efforts in getting inventory. He already has a lot of investors. He's done things correctly. He already has a horse trailer full of horses ready to go to the race, so to speak. So you want to document what your goals are. All right, you should have an idea of how many listings would you like on an annual basis, and then you can break that down to a monthly basis, weekly basis, and then ultimately what you'd like to see on a daily basis. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. Once we have that information, we'll know how many letters you should be sending out. Okay. Now remember, one of the key prerequisites for this is to work effectively. It's that you already do have buyers at the ready, buyers who are, if you screen and qualified, you know, they're qualified financially, and you screen them for timing and motivation, readiness, willingness, and ability. Okay, all that has to do with this. So once you have your goals established, and you have demand, so your clients are telling you, or they're asking you, hey, this is what I would like to purchase now. I'd like to purchase, you know, an eightplex or a duplex, or I want to flip a property. Once you know what the demand is, then we'll know how to determine who we should send the letter to. Okay, so first thing is first, though, is always identify the type of property, and your buying clients will indicate to you what it is they want, and then we can customize the letter to reflect that, right? Because if you notice in the letter that I provided in the example right here, it says, you know, I have clients interested in a 4-unit building just like yours. In other words, this client wants to buy a 4-unit building. So back to the checklist, you should identify what your demand is for. Okay. All right. Now, obviously, the next thing is to get the letter, this letter here, off of the silver level membership section on myinvestmentservices.com website. You get the Word version there, so copy the Word version, just download it on your computer, okay? And you can modify it and customize it all day long. So obviously that's step 3, get a copy of the letter. Now, the fourth thing is, how do you identify specific owners of specific properties in specific areas? Now, without going into a lot of detail, because I'm simply reviewing the checklist here, a lot of this information we've already covered before, and you can find this on the appropriate, relevant webinars that are out there on the database. They're all recorded for you to pull up at any time and download and save, and quite frankly, keep forever if you'd like. But you can also strip off the audio by using an MP3 converter. They're free. There's a free app that you can get. Where you can take a we're using GoToWebinar. So you can take a GoToWebinar recording, use MP3, the free MP3 app, and strip off the audio and make yourself a recording of that. You can listen to it in your car, on your phone, what have you, okay? But in any case, back to this. You can find all the information in step 4 on those recorded webinars. And essentially what we're doing is using the process we go over in module 1, which is first have a school report that shows you by school area and price range. Unless you're in Canada, where we don't use the school area, we use the MLS area, or New York, where we use the zip code, okay, in New York City. But that's the first thing, is identify the right areas to invest in based on number of active listings, number of sold listings, typically in a 90-day period, okay, in specific areas. All right, the next thing was we used Melissa data to determine, to narrow down the scope of our effort even further. So we'll go from, school area or zip code, for example, and narrow it down further to neighborhood, right? And that's how and why we use Melissa data. And that's one of the things we go over in the free class, by the way. Up in Canada, we're not using Melissa data, we're using Canada Post, okay? In fact, I just went over that today with some Canadians. In any case, what I'm getting at is I just want to refresh your memory that you should brush up on your skills when it comes to number 4 here, right? You're locating the right kind of neighborhoods, right? Step number 5 is, again, this is where we use more information available to us, usually online. In some areas, again, I'll use Canada as an example. some information is available online, public information available online in Canada. In some cases, you have to go to the courthouse to find this information. In almost every area in the United States, with few exceptions, all the information is loaded online. All the public records are loaded online. Tax assessor records, as well as public records in the way of court records, okay? Excuse me, by the way, up in Canada, your tax records are available online too. In any case, back to public records and number 5 here. We want to look for court records identifying people who own properties who may need to or want to sell. And the obvious examples are, divorce, bankruptcy, foreclosure, probate, landlord-tenant issues, those types of things. You can determine who those people are because in most areas, most counties, you can search by date range, and and we like to have you search going back 1 week, so you have really fresh data, really fresh records, okay? Go back 1 week and see who has filed for divorce in the last 7 days, or see who has filed a landlord-tenant complaint, i.e. an eviction, in the last 7 days. One of the things you want to remember here is that we like to use public records, and sometimes you have to pay for it. Sometimes they might charge you $30 for a year or $30 for a month. Believe me, it is well worth it, okay? Because what it allows you to do is allows you to have direct access to the public records and not have to go through attorneys, okay? Which basically takes up time, and often they're giving you the same data they're giving other people, and it's often stale. It's stale data. So you need actual current data to get the most out of this effort. So in any case, what I'm getting at here is in step number 5, we're going to mail the letter to the folks who are going through bankruptcy, divorce, foreclosure, probate, evictions, etc. In the specific areas that are school report or area report and Melissa data showed us where we should be. In other words, we're not going to send this letter out to everybody who's going through divorce. And likewise, we're not going to send this letter out to everybody in a particular neighborhood just because school report said we should do so. What we are doing is combining the 2 sources of data and only sending the letter, in the example of divorce, to people going through divorce in those specific neighborhoods. And this is what really is going to separate you from the herd, because most agents are not doing this. Most of them are doing broadcast mailings, and you can get some success that way, but why would you want to potentially get a listing in an area that's not a good area for your clients, okay? Or why would you send a letter to everybody in an area? Most of them have no interest in what we have to say. It's a far better use of our time to identify people who need to or want to sell in the specific areas. We're combining the 2 sources of data. So that's step number 5. Step number 6, obviously send a letter only to those recipients identified in step number 5, okay? We do not want to mass mail this letter. All right, something really important, just like any other direct mail routine, this is definitely a repeat process. So general rule of thumb is this: you want to send a letter out to the same people as many as 12 times. Now I say that with a qualification here, and that is when people respond to you from the letter, you no longer have to keep sending them the letter because they've now responded to you and they're technically a prospect. And at that point, you put on your agent hat and you go set up your appointment and do your job and get the thing under contract, get it listed, okay? We keep it at 12 because some people just simply don't respond, and after 12 times, they're likely not going to respond. However, we've had plenty of exceptions. We have plenty of cases where people would stop sending the letter after the 12th month, and consumers would call them and say, hey, why did you stop sending that letter? I've been meaning to call you, I've just been busy. Okay, that's just part of it. The second part is this. We use the rule of thumb of sending out this letter every month for 12 months. However, there are some exceptions. For example, if you have somebody who just filed for divorce, okay, now there's always various variations to how you use this. But someone who just filed for divorce, we don't want to just send a thing once and send it again 4 weeks later. We want to send that letter every single week for 4 weeks. and then we send it every 2 weeks for 2 mailings for another month, that is, and then you can send it monthly after that. Same thing with probate, bankruptcy, foreclosure. I would send it every week and keep sending it every week for 3 months. That would be your 12 mailings. So essentially what I'm getting at is there's a different frequency associated with different recipients. In other words, people going through bankruptcy, foreclosure actually are often the same people going through divorce, to be honest with you. But people going through probate are typically just going through probate. They're not, that's where you have a decedent. They're not going through other hardships at the time. Generally speaking, that is. They're going through probate, but they're at the same time not evicting somebody, or they're not going through bankruptcy or foreclosure or divorce, right? So what I'm getting at is different recipients have different frequencies of mailings, okay? All right, number 8 is follow-up. One of the things I really encourage you to do is this. If you, let's say you're sending this letter out to owners of multi-unit properties, 2 units, 8 units, 6 units, what have you, and you send out a couple of mailings and they haven't responded, usually you're sending these to a defined area. So what that means you can do is you can go by that area on a Wednesday afternoon or a Saturday morning and see if you can see people out there cutting the grass, painting the shutters, repairing the roof, installing a door or a window, things like that, because a lot of times you'd be surprised at how often the person doing that work is the owner of the property. And you could just walk up, introduce yourself, and say, "Hi, I'm Kristen, and I'm the one that's been sending you this letter. I happen to notice you're here working today. Have you got a few moments?" Okay, and then go into you go into realtor mode, and you let them know that, hey, I've got buyers. Tell them you're not just sending that letter to spend money on stamps. You actually have buyers interested in properties just like theirs. Now, the fact is, if they're out there working on their property, that's usually a very good sign. But also, they're probably doing it wrong. I mean, if you really invest correctly, you're not the one driving around in a pickup truck fixing stuff. You have other people do that. The fact that these folks are doing that means is they're limiting themselves. It'd be impossible for them to own hundreds of units when they're actually out there the ones doing the work. In any case, what I'm getting at is use that as an opportunity to increase your odds of conversion. In other words, the technique is intended to attract people in an indirect way, okay? However, you can combine that with the direct approach, but only after you send a couple of letters. So again, the recap of that step is this. Step number 8. For those who have not responded to you, if you choose to do so, you can add step number 8, which is follow up with them directly in person by stopping by the properties, okay? So just want to emphasize that part of it. And again, you just step in there to realtor mode, or if you're an investor, step into investor mode, and you give them your presentation or your pitch, if you will, okay? Now you go ahead and move forward. Let's assume you get the listing, go ahead and get that thing up on the system and start making some money, okay? All right, now that's the checklist. Let me do a quick pause here and check for questions, so hang on one second. Let's see what we've got here. Almost there. Okay, there we are. So let me scroll backwards. I got to make sure I got all the questions covered. It looks like we've got a couple of them coming in. Okay. So this is Mark Hamilton. Hey, Mark. So Mark is asking, okay, creative financing options would make a good session. Okay, what I'll do, Mark, is I'm going to write that down for one of our upcoming webinars. So hang on one second. Let me go to, when is next week's anyways? I think that is the Monday, okay? All right. Hey, Mark, if you could also, I'm going to write this down, but email actually works better. However, I'm going to write this down because we haven't gone over that in quite a while. And believe it or not, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, as you might imagine. Okay, let's see, another question. Okay, this is from Dawn. Hey, Dawn Ray. Okay, Dawn is asking, what if you are so new to the industry you don't have clients yet? Well, Dawn, what we recommend is for brand new agents is in the case of investors, to actually go for the buyers first. It sounds counterintuitive because I'm a broker. I mean, a lot of you are hearing from your brokers, get me listings, get me listings, get me listings, which is true. You know, in this business of real estate, uh, the brokerage or agents that have the listings, when you control the listings, you control the marketplace. The difference is, Dawn, is when you're working with owner occupants, you lead with listings. You get the listings first, and a once in a 10-year buyer will call you 30% of the time. That's the statistic on the owner occupant business. However, what we discover with us investors is if you want investor listings, get the buyers first. Come to the race with horses in your trailer, and you get far more responses, far more favorable responses from investors who will now take you seriously. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's just what we discovered over the years. You'll find yourself getting far more listings that way. So you can use the letter to get inventory, no doubt about it. But if you don't have buyers at the ready, just be prepared, because sometimes this can backfire on you. In fact, we encourage you, we train you to get buyers first and then use the letter to get inventory. So you would use the booklet, the workshop, for example. So in other words, all the folks that want to talk about the workshop, we will do that as the next subject. And that'll help shed some light on the matter for you to show you how you can get clients and build up demand with qualified people. And then when you go to get listings, even if they're not in investor-owned properties, if they're single-family homes owned by people who are in distress, again, divorce, bankruptcy, etc. And you show up there with your list of buyers, with the ones who are actively participating highlighted in yellow, believe me, you're going to get a lot higher conversions. And we'll talk about that more here in a second. But good, excellent question, Dawn. Thank you very much. Okay, this is Dawn. It was sort of a follow-up. So Dawn is saying, well, say you don't have a Mr. Matajasic to add your letter. So Dawn, you definitely want to be authentic and use an actual person. No doubt about it. Just know this: the world can be a small world, and when you work with investors, you're working with about, on average, about 36 to 37% of the marketplace. In some areas, it's higher. I mean, in California, the entire state is 40% investor-owned. There's parts of New York, the Queens, Brooklyn, Bronx, where the percentage of investor-owned properties is around 70%. They literally own 2/3 of the properties. It's just amazing. So, in any case, you just know this: that if you try to pull the wool over somebody's eyes, you're just trying to break into the business, and you're using this inauthentically, I guess I should say, there's a real good chance it'll catch up with you in a not so good way. So that's why we really have you get your buyers first, build up the demand. Then when you go get the inventory, you can speak with confidence, Dawn, and you're going to feel a whole lot more confident. You'll feel a whole lot better knowing you can actually sell that property like that, So excellent question, by the way. Okay, let's see. We had another one. Mark saying you got it. Well, thanks, Mark, for doing that. I appreciate it. Okay, this is Faisal. Faisal saying, Faisal, how you doing? Hey, Faisal, if you could do me a favor, Faisal, give me a call tomorrow or text me, because I just want to follow up with you from a conversation from last week. You had an appointment that I wanted to see if you got the results from yet. So Faisal's asking, okay, what makes this letter, hang on one second. What makes this letter than people who send yellow letter and other marketing pieces? I think what you're saying is what makes this letter more successful. Generally speaking, Faisal, the yellow letter has been out now for a little bit, for about 15 years, and consumers are kind of they're kind of hip to it. They know what it is. They see it coming in. They realize that it actually is computer generated. It's just that their intuition tells them it's actually a little bit obvious when you actually look at a yellow letter. You can see that the ink is not handwritten if you look closely. Also, the envelopes are often they're doing mass mailing, so they're using like metered mail. That's another dead giveaway. Also, the letters will often be, the salutation will not be name specific. They'll just say, dear friend, dear neighbor, dear sir, what have you. Now, Faisal, since you brought it up, I will tell you, I haven't used it myself, but apparently there's new technology out there that allows you to systematically generate letters that they really do look authentic. In fact, the way the technology works is it actually is writing the letter, if you can imagine that. But what it does is it takes samples of your writing, which, by the way, you do for yellow letters in some software systems. But in this case, they're using your samples of letters, lowercase, uppercase, cursive, whole 9 yards, and generating these letters. And it allows you to do a mail merge, which means you can put specific salutations on there, dear Faisal, dear Gary, as opposed to dear sir, dear ma'am. So this new technology apparently works well. It's probably a little bit pricey. I haven't used it myself, and I don't even know the name of it. I'll see if I can find out for you. But back to the subject here. The letter that really is typed by you and hand signed by you with no letterhead generally will get you a much higher response rate. And since I mentioned it, I will tell you that we have had students who've handwritten the letter, and the response rates do go up. It goes up to, I think, an average of 15-point-something% to over 18%. And the reason is, Faisal, is I think a handwritten letter, just, people can tell it really is handwritten, and it looks more real, looks more sincere, and it's more personal. It's more personal. So I think the handwritten letter gets the highest open rate of all, but it has to be an actual handwritten letter. It can't be one of the yellow letters. So in any case, I appreciate the question, Faisal, and hope that helps to give you some insight there. Let's see, this is from Liz. Hi, Liz. Okay, Liz is asking, what were the time frames for the repeat letters and their corresponding issues, divorce, probate, landlord, etc.? Okay, good question, Liz. So for people going through divorce, Liz, what we learned is if we send the letter out literally the first week and send that out every week for 4 weeks, that's the first 4 rotations. So for once a week for 4 weeks, and then you send it bi-weekly after that for another month. So that's 2 more mailings, and then you go monthly after that. But at that point, you should be stopping by the property. Okay, that's for divorce. For probate, we generally send that thing out every week. Okay, for 12 times. Now, I've seen variations of that, Liz. I've seen people send it out 4 weeks and then just do it every month after that. I've seen people do it every week straight until they get a response, which was what I did. Okay. Now the other was bankruptcy, foreclosure. For bankruptcy and foreclosure, they're very similar. They're both very painful processes for people. So what we do there is send that thing out and send it out. Here's the trick on this. Send it out every week. However, if you happen to be in an area where you're sending the letter, okay, and you've got 3 people going through bankruptcy or probate, whatever, I'm sorry, bankruptcy or foreclosure, don't wait till the 4th billing to go visit the property. Go visit the property within the first couple of weeks, okay? And a couple things to remember here, folks, about people going through these stressful situations. They're getting postcards. They're getting people dropping off their business cards and sticking them in the door. They're getting people putting door hangers on the door with paper bags with goodies in there. That kind of stuff actually freaks them out sometimes, right? If you notice in our letter, let me bring the letter back up here again real quick. If you notice here, it's very neutral. It doesn't say, Dear Clay, I'm sorry to hear about your pending divorce, or I'm sorry to hear about the loss of a loved one. We don't do anything like that at all. We don't say anything like that at all. It's sent through the mail, which is non-threatening. It's in a standard, plain, standard legal size envelope, okay, plain vanilla, hand addressed, all right? So it's very non-threatening, and it's not direct. You're not sticking it in their door. You're just sending it through the U.S. mail. It doesn't mean every one of them is going to get open, but it does increase your open rate. And quite frankly, everybody else is saying things that they shouldn't probably be saying. And They're indicating that they know these folks are going through divorce, for example, and that freaks them out. They wonder, well, how does this person know that? So we don't say anything like that in this letter. The other thing too is this. Let's say they do ask you. They call you up and they say, hey, this just intrigues me. I do need to sell. I'm interested in what this thing would sell for. I've received information from other realtors. Yours seem to be a little more authentic and genuine. You just offered a solution. You offered you made it. You didn't ask for the business. You didn't say I'd like to make an appointment. That's called asking for business. This letter makes an offer for a fee evaluation. Just let me know. I'll be glad to give it to you. There's no obligation. But when you ask for business right out of the gate and you tell people, I understand you're going through a divorce, they may be offended, and they might call you and say, how the heck did you find this out? This is a little bit unsettling here, right? We don't want any of those scenarios. We don't want any more roadblocks than we already have. So this is a little bit more of a kinder, gentler way to approach them and not suggest anything about the current circumstances, but simply offer a solution. Okay, it's more respectful, and quite frankly, it's easier. So in any case, so back to your question, Liz. I think we covered divorce, probate, bankruptcy, foreclosure, evictions. I would send that thing out every single week for probably 8 weeks, because an eviction process at a minimum will take a month, 30 days. But in most cases, somebody's going to, file an appeal. They're going to delay the thing. There's all kinds of things people can do. So I'd send that thing out easily every week for 8 weeks, and then you can go bi-weekly after that, or just go monthly after that. I know that landlords going through landlord-tenant issues, if they have multiple landlord-tenant issues, and you can determine that by looking at the public records, generally they're going to be more highly motivated to want to sell. Okay, so those are the frequencies there. I appreciate the question, because that is an excellent question. And let me go back here and see. Christopher's asking, okay, where do we find the buyers to build the demand? So this is Chris. Hey, Chris. So Chris, again, we use the buyer techniques to get the buyers. If you're just breaking into the business, I strongly encourage you to use the booklet. Okay, the booklet is also a non-threatening way to provide valuable information to prospective buyers. And we target specific groups of people with the booklet. So we target groups that we know who are more likely to want to invest, like chiropractors and dentists, engineers, things like that. So as you go through the material, Chris, also remember to go to the My Investment Services website, go into the membership section, members area, and log into Silver Level, which you're all by default a silver level member. Scroll down and look for the webinars that identify discussion of booklet, discussion of workshop, which is another thing we'll be discussing here. Those are the techniques that allow you to get buyers pretty easily and quickly. Okay, and you can get the written material, the audio visual, and also checklists on those, right? So when I go over the workshop, I'm going to give you guys a checklist on the workshop too, as well as the written version of the recording. We'll give you all that. But just so you'll have those techniques, Chris. Usually it moves pretty quickly, and once you get a few, you don't need like 100 buyers. You just need just a handful. I mean, all you need is really a half a dozen, maybe even 4 qualified people who are ready, willing, and able to purchase. Now you can go after the properties. Okay. So remember, it doesn't take much. I mean, to get started here, guys, it really does not take much at all. Let's see, this is Michael. Hey, Michael. Michael's asking, do you have a surefire conversation for how to get a client to be the client listed in the letter? Yeah, actually, it's quite easy, Michael. This is one of the easiest things you'll be doing. So let's say you've got yourself a handful of buyers, 4 buyers, 5 buyers, 6 buyers. I would actually use by the way, in the beginning, you're just going to use one version of one letter with one name. But once you master the technique and you're ready to go out there and duplicate your efforts, I would have any of your buyers use any of their last names on this letter for different purposes. One letter might be going out for single-family homes for flipping. You'd use one guy's name for that. Another letter might be looking for, you know, triplexes. You use a different name for that. But make sure they're in alignment with your clients. In other words, make sure you have another client who really does want a triplex and use that person's name. So all I did, honestly, Michael, you should already have a relationship with them where you can call them and say, look, I think I may be able to find specific properties for you that are not on the MLS, but it requires me to send a direct letter, and I want to mention your name. Is it okay if I use your last name in this letter to help me identify these properties and get these properties for you to invest in? So you're not necessarily relying, this is you speaking to them, so you, the client, are not necessarily relying on me to use only the MLS. Would you like for me to find properties off market for you by doing that? And that's really your conversation, Michael. That's the script. And I can tell you, over all the years, I never had a single client ever say, hey, you can't use my last name. Usually they're like, they use my first name, use my last name, use whatever name you can to go get me some more inventory. So you actually find people in the world of investors far more agreeable. In other words, I wouldn't use that technique with owner occupants. You can try it, but they're going to probably wonder what's wrong with you, right? Investors, though, they get it. They know what it takes to be successful investing, and they're going to be supporting you 100%. Excellent question, by the way, too. Thanks for that question. Fassel says 100% for call. What times work for you? So Fassel, tomorrow, let's go back here. Hang on one second. If you're able to call, I'm East Coast now, Fassel. So if you're able to call anytime up till, let me go back here and see what, I have some coaching calls tomorrow. Anytime up till 4. Just text me, call me, and we'll get you on the phone. Okay, so thanks for bringing it up. Okay, Liz is saying thank you. You're welcome, Liz. Okay, let's see. Jeff is asking. Let me go back here. Okay, all right. Why not put a business card in the mailing? To me, it makes it more valuable as an agent that is local. Well, in the letter, so let's look at the letter, Jeff. The reason we don't include like a letterhead or the business card is it just makes it more salesy. If you notice in here, we do let them know that we are a realtor. Okay, we give them the address, phone number, email address, the whole 9 yards, fax. So we actually essentially give them our business card here, all the contact information. What we're doing is we're trying to make it, Jeff, more personal. More personal is what we're doing. You know, a lot of times a business card doesn't really offer them anything. It just gives them contact information. So the letter actually gives them an offer, something they can actually respond to, and they have your contact information right here. However, I will tell you this, we've tried and tested things every which way, Jeff. If I would encourage you to test it, do a mailing with the card, and do a mailing without the card, and then compare the results and see what happens there. It's called split testing. So I would try that. Okay, this is Maxine. Hi, Maxine. Maxine's asking, okay, I came on a little bit late on the letter. Is there sufficient information there to disclose that you are a real estate agent? Sorry, I missed. Yeah, actually, ironically, I just got to your question here, Maxine, and we just went over that. So down here, you do have to disclose in the letter. Now, in most states and provinces, disclosure is in the letter itself, not on the envelope. There's very few exceptions. In California, on your envelope, you do have to provide your license ID. Okay. In most other states and provinces, though, you don't have to provide that at all. And if you do, you can provide it in the letter itself. So, Maxine, in the letter itself, we're telling them we're a realtor right here. Okay. And when you get into meaningful discussions, first meaningful discussion, you absolutely want to do your disclosure, verbal disclosure and written disclosure. That's the full-blown disclosure that's state by state and province by province, okay? Also, by the way, this came up last week. When I use this letter, if you notice here, I don't have the statement in here that says if your property is currently under contract with another realtor, this letter is not intended to be a solicitation of your business. If you don't check to see if the property is on the MLS, then you should use that statement at the bottom. This letter doesn't have it, but you should remember to use that statement in your letter if you're not going to take the step to determine if a property is or is on the MLS. Okay, so just remember that. Let's see here, another one we got from Jonathan. Hey, Jonathan. Okay, Jonathan is asking, okay, I know as far as the rules of, oops, excuse me, engagement go, you recommend specializing in a specific type of investor. Is there one better suited for someone new to the business? Yes, good question, Jonathan. If you're just breaking into the business, I would recommend you work with chiropractors and dentists. They're the easiest people to work with. There are a lot of them out there. They're business oriented. They want to succeed. They want you to succeed. They're service oriented, just like we are. Okay. Engineers are great clients, but if you're not prepared for them, they're going to ask you a lot of questions. You need to be prepared. So I wouldn't start off with engineers unless you have contacts who are engineers. Okay, then you can certainly start with them. But I wouldn't approach engineers unless or until you really feel comfortable with the calculators and the spreadsheets, or you've already worked with a few investors, or again you have some as a personal contacts. Excellent question, by the way. Let's see here. Next question, Liz again. So Liz is asking, did you say that there is a script to talk buyers with regards to using their name in the letter? It's not really a script, Liz. And it's not written down. It's just really, assuming you have a handful of buyers and you want to get some inventory, get some listings, call your buyers up and say, look, I think I can locate properties outside the MLS. In order to do so, I have this letter I use, but it requires me to use a client's last name. Would you like me to use your last name in this letter if I can find specific properties specifically for you that are not on the MLS? And just pose it that way, Liz. And that's all I did. And honestly, I never had anybody say no to that. Okay, so we're caught up on questions. I want to do one more thing here, guys, if I could. Just kind of filling in a little bit on this checklist. Couple things here. So you know that I suggest you send this 12 times, all right? Generally what I do is if I've sent this, say, 3 times without a response, sometimes let's say I'm sending it monthly and I haven't had a response, so I'm in the 3rd month, I would include an informal CMA. In other words, not a full-blown official looking CMA, but something you can print off in 3 pages and put in there with the letter. So, for example, in the case of the letter here, the example letter, I'm looking for a 4-plex, right? Now, let's say I've sent this letter out, and out of 30 people, I've had 3 responses, and I want to get more responses, and I'm on the 3rd month or 4th month. I will send in there a 3-page informal CMA, and what I mean by that is I'll send in 1 page of active listings, in other words, listings of other 4-unit properties in the area. I'll send them another page, again, these are summary sheets, by the way, another summary sheet of everything that's under contract that is also 4 units. And a 3rd sheet would be a sheet of all the properties that sold in the last year that happen to be 4-plexes. So I'll showing them this is what's happening in their marketplace, this is what's available, and this is what's possible. And just know that that's going to be relevant information that's going to be pertinent to the people you're sending the letter to. You're showing these owners that yes, they can sell their properties, and here's kind of what they could roughly expect in the sale of their property. So that's one thing I would do. Now let's say we go a couple of more mailings and I still don't have anything. What I might do is include an article, a recent article on real estate in that area. If it's a multi-unit, I might look up to see if I find anything on rent controls or landlord-tenant legislation. In the case of single-family homes, I'm looking for flippers. I might include something on bankruptcy, foreclosure, short sales, things like that. The bottom line is another technique is you can send a news article, whether it's online or in print. Again, just make copies or printouts and include that in the letter, okay? That's another technique. Another technique, a 3rd technique would be this, and this one takes some guts to do it. Okay, you notice here I'm naming one of the clients by name, an actual, authentic, real person by last name, and boy, does that work. What I do there, let's say I'm towards the end of my 12 mailings, and some people still have not responded to me. I will actually print off a list of my buyers by last name only, okay? No other information, just last name only. No Mr., no Mrs., just last name. And I will highlight the ones who are actively engaged in the game at that moment. In other words, they have money, they want to spend, they want to invest. And I tell them, the ones highlighted are the ones who are actively engaged in investing right now. They want a property right now. And I put that in there, and you'd be surprised at how many calls that will generate. So that's just a couple of 3 quick techniques you can use to increase your odds. Let's see, I want to go over one more thing here. And this comes up almost every time we go over the letter. So let's say you send this letter out, okay? And you get responses. And one of the responses is, hey, Gary, I got your letter. You've got me intrigued. I do agree inventory is tight. Yes, I own a fourplex. I considered selling, but I just, quite frankly, I haven't really been thrilled with other agents before. You know, why don't you just introduce me directly to Mr. Matajasic? And here's what I say, and I'm going to kind of go slow with this so you can have time to write this down, okay? Let's say Liz, that was you. You responded to me and you said, hey, Gary, why don't you just introduce me to Mr. Matajasic? I will say this. I'll say, Liz, I appreciate your question. I understand why you're asking it. It's an excellent question. However, inventory is tight right now. Remember the letter right here? Inventory is tight right now. So I just repeat what's already in the letter that they have. Inventory is tight right now. And I'll say, look, I can introduce you to Mr. Matajasic tonight. No problem. However, if we do that, and let's say you and Mr. Matajasic hit it off, number one is before I bring him over, I'm going to send you what's called a showing agreement that protects me so that if I introduce you in a deal and you consummate a transaction, that I'm duly compensated. Well, you're in agreement with that. Okay, great. I'll send the showing agreement over right now. Now, once you cross that hurdle, Liz, and anybody else taking notes here, the next step is this. Remember, inventory is tight right now. Now, I'll bring Mr. Matajasic over. He's interested. He wants to look at properties today. All right? But can I guarantee Mr. Matajasic is going to like your property? Well, any good agent who's dealing truthfully will say, well, no, you cannot guarantee that your Mr. Matajasic is going to like that specific fourplex in this example. We know he wants a fourplex. We just don't know which ones he's going to like. So right away, Liz, I can bring him over, but I cannot guarantee he's going to like your specific property. Would you agree? And most people would say, yep, that makes sense. Then I'll say this. Okay, let's assume I do bring him over and he does like your property. Now, I can't guarantee he's actually going to make an offer, can I? And the answer, of course, is no. You can't guarantee anybody's behavior. And then I'll say this. I'll say, look, here's the deal. Let's say I bring him over. He likes the property. He does make an offer. That unfortunately puts you at a negotiating disadvantage. The reason is now you're only negotiating with one person on one contract, and that person knows that your property is not listed and you've got no other people coming in. That puts you, the owner, at a disadvantage. So let's think about this. If I put this out there on the system and and we put it out there in front of all the agents who will bring in all of their clients, potentially making multiple offers, what does that do for the price of your property? What is likely to happen to the value of your property? Well, that's right, it's going to go up. Isn't it in your best interest? I mean, don't you want to get the most money you can as fast as you can on your property? And obviously there's no way to say no to that, so now you get yourself into a listing position. Now you get the property listed. Now, from time to time, you will come across somebody who says that no matter what you say, they do not want to list it. They don't want the publicity for whatever reason, and you just have to do a one-off, what we call a one-off or a out-of-pocket transaction, and then you definitely want to do a showing agreement with that. Okay, I just want to give you that script so that you know that when this situation arises, because it's going to arise, number one is you're dealing authentically and genuinely, because you really did actually name somebody who's an authentic, real person. And number two is you're still prepared to give yourself the best opportunity to get that property listed. And if you're wondering why would you even do this, because you're promising your buyer you're going to find them a property. Well, you are going to find them a property. There's no doubt about it. But the problem is you can't guarantee they're going to like any particular property. That's why you want to find as many as you can. You have an obligation to them to help them find the property they want. At the same time, when you meet these owners, these sellers of properties, even if they're not your client at that moment, you do owe them truthfulness and fairness. If you read, every one of you, if you read your state or province code of ethics, your real estate rules or regulations, if you will, in there, at least in all the ones I've seen, which is 48 of all over 48 states and 3 Canadian provinces, it does say that you owe any consumer truthfulness and fairness. The only ones you owe confidentiality to are your actual clients, people who sign agreements with you. But to every consumer, you owe them fairness and truthfulness. Isn't it not truthful and fair to let them know that you could potentially make more money on your property by listing it, putting it on the market? I mean, they might say, well, what about all the commission? Well, that's true, but let's face it. We can demonstrate statistically that they could command a higher price by bringing in multiple offers that will far more than compensate for the 6% or 4% or 5% that they're going to let go of on the sale of the property. So always remember, you've got a great opportunity here to really beef up your listings, which will help you actually attract more buyers too, by the way. Okay, let me go down. We've got some more questions coming in before we wrap things up. Roger's saying, great tips. Thanks for the advice and info. Well, you're welcome, Roger. Hey, Roger, I'm not sure I'm going to be coming into northern New Jersey, New York like I thought it was. Well, for Fassel too, if you're still on Fassel, we may be delaying that till late winter, early spring. I'm not sure. I've got to talk to some people and figure out what it is they're planning on doing. But I'll keep you posted on that. If I'm driving through the area, like I know I'll be going from Massachusetts to Pennsylvania between September and October, I definitely want to stop in and see you guys, okay? Good. Hey guys, I'll tell you what, we're essentially at the stopping point. So let's do this. Instead of starting something new, let's start next week on the workshop. We'll go into it in great detail, and anything we don't complete next week, we will continue on the following webinar. So just like this one took 2 webinars, we'll take as long as we need to on the workshop. So all of you who are wondering how do you get new clients, new buyers, you know, Jonathan and Liz, just know this, if you use the workshop, it is the fastest way to get clients, bar none. It is really, really fast. And we're going to show you how to niche it down to get very, very niche specific. So in the meantime, guys, thanks for all the great questions, guys, and I appreciate you participating in the webinar tonight. I will look for you next, I believe that's next Monday. Yep, next Monday. What we'll do is we'll go over the workshop in great detail. We'll go over how you actually set it up, how you bring, we call putting butts in the seats, how you put butts in the seats. We'll go over agenda, what do you actually do at a workshop, and follow up. And again, it may take 2 webinars, but just know that we're going to cover that in great, great detail. So I thank you all for participating. Mark, you're very welcome. Thank you for your kind words here. I enjoy sharing with all of you and teaching, instructing, and guiding. It's just, I can't begin to describe to you the fulfillment I get from this. So I appreciate everything you're doing and your kind words. And also want to wish you all an awesome week and weekend coming up here. And I will see you all next week. So in the meantime, God bless you and your families. And please, please let me know. Email me, text me if you need anything at all. And please, whenever you feel like you're out there alone, if you're stuck on a transaction, that's more urgent. Please text me if you're stuck on a transaction. Okay, guys, God bless and good night. And we will see you next week. Bye-bye.